what is series fatigue and what are your top tips for overcoming it? Because I know I've definitely experienced this in the past.
Yeah.
And no one else I know has mentioned it.
Well, I mean, I don't know where that sort of term has come from. That's just how I know I've felt about my series at one point or another. So series fatigue is pretty much what it says on the label. It's, when an author is just exhausted at the thought of continuing work on a series. And I think that can happen because of burnout, which whether that's to do with writing or, life, it can have to do with poor sales or problems in the story. Basically a range of reasons. For a range of reasons, an author can experience decision fatigue. And I guess my sort of top tips for overcoming it would be, firstly, take a break, which I know it sounds really obvious, but I think it's something that a lot of authors really struggle to do. And I know I'm guilty of it, that when I am feeling, and I don't want to say blocked, but when I am, facing that sort of feeling with my work where I just don't want to do it anymore. I'm just exhausted. I've been hammering out however many words a day. I've been living in this world for, it could be a month like NaNoWriMo, but also people write series over the course of years. You can be with characters and plot lines and all these sorts of things for years and years. So I think it is quite natural sometimes to have an element of fatigue with a series. So the first thing I would say would be to take a break. And, whether that means you work on something else, whether that means you take a break from writing altogether, I think it's really important sometimes to put a bit of distance between you and your work. Another thing I'd say is talk to someone. So the main memory I have of having series fatigue was with that third book in the Oromir Chronicles, where I had backed myself into so many corners. I'd been in the world and in that series for 3 years, and I was just sort of like, I just want it to be done so I can move on to something else. And I found that talking to people, namely my beta readers, really helped, because sometimes when you don't have the enthusiasm for your work, someone else who does can sort of revive it in you. And talking to people who love your work and who want to see it through as much as you do can really sort of rejuvenate that passion you have or had for your series. And the other thing that I would say is to prioritize creative input. And I think that sounds a little bit wanky, but it has helped me so much in a way that I didn't really realize it could. So what I mean by that is read books for pleasure, watch TV series for pleasure, go on walks or whatever it is that, makes you feel refreshed and creative and inspired. Don't think of that as, you're taking a holiday or something. That is part of your work. That is part of the creative process. And I sort of fell into this trap earlier this year when I was trying to come up with ideas for my new series, but I couldn't actually remember the last time I'd read a book for pleasure and not research or marketing or work in general. And it was a friend of mine who said, when was the last time you read a book for you? And that it didn't have to be in your genre. It didn't have to be research, because sometimes I find it hard to differentiate between reading for pleasure and reading for work, because I love fantasy as a genre and I enjoy reading it. But what I was doing was reading so much fantasy in a sort of author mindset rather than a reader mindset, and trying to pick out tropes and all that sort of stuff. So I ended up reading something totally different, some romance thing that was like way outside of what I normally read. And I got addicted, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And suddenly that weight just lifted from my shoulders. And even though that book had nothing to do with what I was working on, just lifting that weight and actually doing something for creative joy really helped then revive how I was feeling about what I was working on. So yeah, definitely those two things.
I should say that's excellent advice. This is very writer's mindset advice in terms of taking a rest, looking after yourself, prioritizing your mental health sometimes, and doing what's good for you. So yeah, all good advice for our listeners, Helen.